All right. So this style is based on a number of things. Most people will tell you that the style is based on palpation, and to a large extent, it's certainly true, and it certainly looks that way. Okay. And we definitely, a lot of us teach, and I used to definitely teach that way, is like, okay, if you find this in the abdomen, use these points, kind of thing. Now I teach it a little bit differently, and first of all, that it's not enough to palpate. Now you can do that. Sometimes you're in a rush, or say if you're, if you have lots and lots of people, or if you're, so that day you might choose to do that. Or where I do this a lot is if you go to like a health fair, and there's like lots of people, and you have to, it's like a 10-minute mini treatment. You're not going to get into their whole history and stuff, and yet you want to give them something. So just palpating and responding to what you find is a perfectly valid method of working. But really, before you start poking people around, you want to get the medical history. You want to get a context. So the whole theory for me is finding something in their medical history that somehow explains their current symptom. Okay? So, for example, they have a shoulder problem, and they say, well, I was gold fading, therefore, I have the shoulder problem. And you have to think, okay, they've had the shoulder problem for, usually they don't come the first day. So they've had it, say, for 2 or 3 years or whatever. You have to ask yourself, how come there are many golfers out there? Many of them do the same action. Many of them have slipped in the same way that this person did. It's not like this person, like everybody, like they lost their footing, whatever they think it is, or it's just repetitive strain. What is it about this person that makes them weaker? Why did this injury grab them? Because if the injury lasts for, a few weeks, okay, then it's not a weakness, it really is a repetitive strain, and, tough luck. But they'll get better. But if it keeps lasting, then there's a chance that something that something's grabbing the body and making it unavailable to move forward. So that's why we're looking at the medical history. In an idealized form, what will happen is you will find the first injury, if you like, and that will, like a domino effect, affect everything else. So, like at age 5, they fell in the tailbone. At age, 12, they had a thyroid problem. I'm just making this up. It's not totally realistic. And at age 20, they had, they got, well, actually, this is a really bad example. They got an autoimmune disorder, because all the problem is that as they go older, actually, those things are going to actually take over, because if somebody has autoimmune disorder, you should treat them for autoimmune, no matter what they came for. Because it will tend, that and diabetes will tend to take over. Okay, those will be the more significant portions of things.
Are you just treating cause? You're not just treating autoimmune, you're treating...
But by treating what you do, the thing is, by treating autoimmune, I'm not treating this autoimmune disease. It's autoimmune type. It's probably one of the deeper causes that are out there. It's manifesting as an autoimmune disorder.
Right.
Okay, so it would be what the TCM people would call either yin deficient fire or heat in the blood sort of thing. So it's a relatively, it's a deeper situation in all likelihood than most other things that we have, and the same thing with diabetes. Okay, so there's a few of those, what I call autonomic nervous system disorders tends to take precedence. Autoimmune disorders tends to take precedence. Diabetes tends to take precedence. Okay, and then the rest are thyroid is also. Okay, so notice all of these actually have to do with kidney. They will come down to kidney. For us, thyroid is kidney disease. Okay, it's not a spleen. Like in TCM, they say heart fire, stomach fire, or spleen G deficiency. For us, it's a very clear kidney, because the kidney circulates the throat, the channel circulates the throat, and it's an endocrine issue. So kidney is endocrine. So in both senses, it makes sense that and clinically speaking, kidney points resolve thyroid. Autoimmune is definitely treated through kidney. Okay? Diabetes is treated by spleen by kidney as well. And autonomic nervous system is not kidney. But it usually will draw in. There's often a strong component of kidney in it, but it can be totally separate, the autonomic nervous system from the kidney. But most of these conditions that we're saying, well, if you have that, regardless of other medical history or other issues, start treating that and keep moving. See how much mileage you get out of treating that, and then do whatever else you want to do. But generally speaking, we're saying whatever your original injury is, and then you have a second, third, or fourth, and now you have the condition you have, you want to find what is the first injury that still reflects somehow in the body, okay? Either because by protocol it's supposed to reflect in this area, or you are associating it in your mind with that injury. And when you treat that injury, suddenly the whole abdomen, or a large part of the abdomen, starts to release. So the idea is it's like a domino effect. I found the first thing that made everything crooked, and when I straightened it out, everything else falls in line. Now, obviously that's idealized, and often what you'll find is first of all, you'll find sometimes that according to the form, they say I have this injury, this is my first injury, and it's totally irrelevant in their lives, or it seems irrelevant in their lives, and it's actually the second or third injury that becomes the first. Okay. Sometimes people recover, So sometimes people recover from something. Not everything has to have taken hold. But what you're looking at is, you're trying to get them to give you the medical history, what happened to me in my life. And you're then trying to figure out of those, which is considered the first. Okay? Now, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Yes, they were sitting down. No, it's fine. Some of these first injuries are not going to be in their lifetime. Okay? It can be something that happened to you in uterus, or it can be something that you inherited from parents. Okay? So another big one is cardiac disorders. Okay? Somebody who comes in, if they have cardiac family, there's a very good chance that I will treat them for cardiac, even though they don't complain about anything to do with the heart at all. They don't have to come with a note from the doctor say, I have arrhythmia, I have prolapse of this valve or that valve, or blockage here. There's a good chance. Now, what does it mean to come from a cardiac family? You have a mother and a father, and you have 4 grandparents. Okay? If you have 3 out of 6 have cardiac, you probably are a cardiac constitution. In all likelihood. If you have from both sides, so it can be 2 from each side, there is a very good chance that you are going to be cardiac. Okay. What I do to test the hypothesis, usually, as they're facing up, I poke on small intestine 11 on the left side and see if it's painful versus the right side. Okay. If left side is clearly more, there's a good chance that they do have a cardiac constitution, so to speak, and I'll stop looking at them. So many thyroid also can be inherited, usually from the mother's side. It's very rare for men to carry thyroid issues. They will display thyroid if the mother had it, if the mother's family had it, but they're much less likely to transmit genetically thyroid disorders. Okay. And generally speaking, men have a lot less thyroid issues, or the peers. What men have, sorry, this was kind of going a little less systematic for a second, so bear with me. The whole class is going to look like that. So we are videoing it, and you can look back, so that kind of hopefully helps also. But that's the nature of medicine. Medicine is just not linear. So I'm sorry, I'm a little bit not linear with this one, so it's mostly my fault. You can blame it on medicine, but it's really me. I lost that so-called linear thought that I had. About women are highly, highly susceptible to thyroid issues. We used to say that 30% of all women, no problem, hi. We used to say that 30% of all women have thyroid issues. Okay, and I believe it's way higher. Okay, one of the problems with thyroid is, yeah, just get more chairs, no problem. And if you want tables, you can take tables. It's a much higher percentage than 30% in terms of clinically, if I start treating thyroid, their symptoms get better. Okay. And that leads me to another thing that I want to stress. If I say, oh, thyroid, or I say adrenal, or I use a lot of the Western names of diseases as opposed to the Chinese. I don't use a lot of the Chinese, and when I use the Chinese, it's relatively primitive. Okay, I'll say spleen, but I'm not getting into, well, spleen down the spleen, and a little wind from the side. You know, like I don't get into this nitty-gritty, you know, TCM methodology. You know, I'll just give it a general sort of organ channel perspective. Okay, so we use a lot of the Western terms. It doesn't mean that an MD is going to agree with us. Okay, all it means is I named it something that is culturally appropriate for our culture. It's not all that appropriate to say to, well, it's totally appropriate to say to the patient whatever you think. Okay, I'm not opposed, but I'm not telling you how to talk to patients. But, you know, if you say to someone on the street, let's say, you have liver cheek congestion, you know, they're going like, what does that mean? I have a windy liver. You know, I have patients sometimes say, oh, I was told I have a windy liver. It's like, okay, I have a windy liver. It sounds like the liver is dangling in the wind or something. So it's much more normal if you say to someone you're hypothyroid. They get it. They know what it means. I mean, you know, anybody on the street, or most people on the street, understand hypothyroid. It means, oh, I'm kind of tired, sluggish, I might be gaining weight, and I might be depressed, maybe I have some hair falling out. You know, that's kind of like there's a general understanding of like, yeah, that's what it means. You know, you say to someone you have spleen Qi deficiency, it's like, what's it, you know, we have to explain. So for me, it's a lot easier to communicate in the language that we have today. It doesn't change the medicine. It only changes the language. It's just, you know, it's the external stuff. You know, and people get so head up about wanting to latch onto our fabulous terms that meant something 2,000. You know, it's like you think about it. Spleen dampness is really meaningful for someone in Southern China working in rice fields. It totally makes sense to them. They get it. It's like you talk to someone about spleen dampness, I mean, you have to kind of like really explain, well, you know, if you're in a slum and you're sinking and you feel very heavy and you really have no motivation to pull, you know you gotta pull yourself out, otherwise you're gonna keep sinking. But you just really, the last thing you want to do is like put a hand down and push yourself up. Okay, that's not how we think. Okay, we don't have a term. The term we have for that is depression. You know, we don't have a term called spleen dampness, so it's less useful for me to talk about it. It doesn't mean it's different. You know, it just means it's my language. Okay? So that aside, and we were somewhere totally different. Okay, sorry. So I'm looking at the medical history, and I'm looking at what I can affect that is the original injury, which may be something that they inherited. Okay? And if I fix that, I'm hoping it doesn't mean 100% better, but I'm getting like a fair amount of movement. Now the issue is, how do I evaluate that movement? If you are someone who's extremely good with pulses, okay, you can press on a point and you can say, wow, the pulse changed, and I am determining that the pulse changed for the better. Okay? You have to be really good to be able to do that. Now, Toyohari people say that you can do that, okay? And a lot of them say they can do that after very little experience or very little, practice. Is it true or not? I don't know. They seem to come in groups, and they all say they feel the same pulse, and they all say they feel the same change in the pulse after they press the point. Well, that's fabulous. You know, no problem. If they can do it, I can't do it, and I don't trust. You know, I definitely don't trust when other people tell me what to do. You know, if there's a group that everybody says, oh yes, it's like this, my first thinking is like, I don't think so. This is a little suspicious. No, because there's a group mentality that comes in. And remember, do you remember how you learned pulses? Or actually how you didn't learn pulses might be the better way to describe it. You were told that there's 21 pulses. You were given certain ideologies. And then you went to clinic, and you say you were 4 people with an instructor or however many you were. And you were given like 30 seconds to figure out, to feel a pulse, right? And there was a certain pressure, at least this is what happened when I was in school. And granted, it was a long time ago, but I don't think it changed. There was a certain pressure to come up with the correct pulse description. You know, it was kind of embarrassing if you said, oh, this pulse is really weak. And then they just strong. It was like, shit, got it wrong. B minus, D minus, whatever. You know, there is a huge pressure to get it right. And I think this is the totally wrong method of learning pulses, because it limits what you can do with it. Okay? My belief is that the way you should learn pulses is just take the pulse and sit there until something comes up to you. And if in the meantime you need to talk to the patient and extract more information so it translates to what you're feeling and correlate, that's totally fine. Nobody says you have to do it blindly. Okay? You just need to keep at it and feel whatever you feel. I'm going to close the doors. I'm not supposed to be doing this one. All right. So, since I don't have the pulse, I don't have that trust in being able to diagnose and certainly not determine points from a pulse, what I do is I poke the abdomen. Okay. When you press on the abdomen and the patient says, ooh, ouch, or uncomfortable, it doesn't have to be pain. Don't mistake it for pain. Okay? When it's uncomfortable, when you press on the abdomen, it's uncomfortable, and then you can press a point, and then they go, wow, it's gone. 2 things happen, okay? Number 1, you get confirmation that didn't come from you. It's at that point it becomes relatively objective, okay? That's a big deal. We don't have a lot of objective methodologies in our medicine. We don't have blood tests. You know, we don't send them to them, you know, we don't do acupuncture under MRIs. Okay, so it gives you a clarity. What I did seems to be correct. It may end up not being correct. How many people get clean blood tests and still they get cancer 3 weeks later? You know, anything's possible, but you have some confidence. But more importantly for me is the patient goes, wow, you really did something. And placebo is the best medicine there has ever been. Okay, there's just no doubt that placebo works better than most of the pills that people take. They might as well take placebo for it. And if, you know, they're talking about how come like all these antidepressants are not, you know, like are not working and stuff. That part of it is the placebo issue. That you might as well give them non-antidepressants. And it's not just, and this is not just medications that affect the mind. And by the way, most of the pain medications on the market now are psychiatric medications. Okay? You change the mind, you change the perception. You change the perception, there's no pain. Or there's more pain, depending on which way you change the perception, granted. But, you know, it's like perception, how people perceive is extremely important, which, you know, in terms of channels, we see why there's so many points around the ears and around the eyes. Like, well, what's the story? Like, all the shoe points are supposed to be, you know, where the meridians start, where the meridians are kind of gathering and umping up. And yet, you know, there's probably more gallbladder and Sanjak points around the ear than there's shoe points altogether. I mean, it's probably a slight exaggeration, but, you know, it's interesting because that's how people perceive. We perceive it through hearing. You know, you hear something, especially in culture that does not read. Think of the Chinese 2,000 years ago, most of them did not read. Okay? So their information came primarily through their ears. Okay? So it's worth contemplating, how do we change perception? If you manage to, if you can show a patient who have discomfort here and I can take it away, you immediately build trust. Okay? If you have trust, the patient has much better chances of getting better. It has nothing to do with your ego. Okay? And the fact that it doesn't have to do with your ego is important because just as much chance as you have of you clearing the abdomen, you have a chance of not clearing the abdomen too. It can happen. So you're vulnerable. You can't do what you took away from yourself is the other part of the placebo effect, which is you take a patient's pulse and you're a doctor and you know what you're doing, right? So you tell, oh yes, you have spleen Qi deficiency and we need to do this, that, and the other with you, and then 3 weeks later you say, oh yes, I see the herbs are really working, your pulse is much more spleen fortified now. Okay? The patient has no clue. I mean, they can't, but if they trust you, they will, now you might be taking the pulse and thinking, oh shit, I don't know what the hell's going on here, or you might be thinking, this is even worse than it was before, or, whatever you're thinking that day, but you can play a game that's going to be very helpful for the patient. You're doing a good job, things are moving better, you can't do that with the abdomen. They're totally in control. So that's one of the things you have to be aware of. You have to be willing to have that vulnerability of the patient is in control, and if it doesn't get better, there's no way you can play games here. It's like the patient knows, so just accept it. So we're looking at the medical history and how can we find one thing or 2 things, or at the most 3. Once you get more than 3, you kind of lost track. Okay, so it's not a very good thing. You really want a more concise sort of medical, out of the medical history to choose this is really important, and then add, maybe 2 things that are really important. That's okay. 3 is still okay. Once you get more than 3 ideas, it's a little odd. So sometimes people ask, well, how many needles do you use in the treatment? It's not relevant. The needles are very, my needling is very light, so it's not like with the Chinese where like get the Qi, and it's, when people say more than 8 needles starts to be depleting, blah, 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 blah. This is not, what's relevant to me is not how many needles, but how many ideas. And if I'm starting to get over 3 ideas, I know that I lost the patient mentally. I don't have clarity. Now, there's a difference between ideas and I added some extra stuff. Adding extra is okay, but knowing what the idea is very important. That's what's going to make you good at this, okay, is having that clarity. So, you got their medical history, you haven't decided anything yet. Okay, you just gathering information. My suggestion with medical history is don't talk about it. Have them write it down in advance and be far away from them. What I do is I have my intake form on the web and I ask them. Nowadays it's kind of so much easier, plus it saves me paper. So, you do it at home and then you print it. Okay, for the 10 cents of the paper, it's like it's worth it. But no, it's more that I want them to do it not when I'm there, because I've noticed that even if I'm just happen to be sitting there while they're writing it down, it ends up being a long conversation and it confuses them. They will not, generally they don't give you the medical history orally very well. It's just the nature of it. It's much better that you get some picture. They can modify the picture you got afterwards. It's okay. It's not written in stone. Okay? People always forget stuff. That's totally acceptable. So you're walking in and you have some sense of what their medical history is. And some of it, maybe their handwriting is really bad or whatever you told. You have no clue, what it really says. Then you can talk about it, but it's good for you to have a larger picture. You still don't make any determinations. It's just little bells that come ring in your mind, go off in your mind. The next step is you put them on the table, face up, and you start poking the abdomen. And I'll show you and stuff in a moment. And again, my suggestion here is Don't get stuck with, okay, you have this, let me treat that. Forget it. Just gather the information. You have this pressure pain here, and pressure pain here, and weirdness here, and this is fine, and this is fine, and this is not, and then you do the neck. So take the full picture. What's in the abdomen? Okay. Now, what you want to do is correlate what you found with, one, the symptom, to the medical history, or rather first the medical history, then the symptom. Okay. Can I now come up with a story? Okay. It's literally I'm making up a story. Why does this person have this problem? Okay. They're a golfer, they have a problem in their elbow, but yes, they say that, I remember that day I went and my foot slipped and my elbow, I don't know, got stuck into the whatever it is, and ever since then I have this golfer's elbow. Or they don't say something like that, but they say, well, I play golf, of course I have golfer's elbow, And you have to say, yeah, a large percentage of people do have that, but a large percentage of people don't. What makes you fall into the category of the people who do? Is there any other weakness in your body that's facilitating that? Because you have the medical history, now it may have no relationship whatsoever to the medical history. Okay. The question is, if I treat the medical history, is the elbow getting better? And you have abdominal findings. If I treat the abdomen, will it affect the elbow? So that's one thing that you're trying to do. Is the medical history affecting the symptom? Is fixing the abdomen affecting the symptom? Now, there's a third thing that's actually more important than that. Can I come up with a story that fixes the abdomen? In other words, say they have, I'm just throwing out names right now, they may be meaningless to you. They have a cancer reflex, they have lung reflex, they have adrenal reflex, they have ovary reflex, they have REN15, which we call anxiety reflex. Worry reflex, they have REN17 called anxiety reflex, they have, they already have lung reflex in the abdomen, let's say they also have it up here. Let's say they have cardiac reflex, only left side, and small intestine 11. Well, great, what do? You have to treat oketsu, adrenal, lungs, might be digestion, immune, because that reflex has three different things, correlated. You have to treat worry and anxiety, and you have to treat cardiac. Well, you're at 5 ideas if you're just tracing the abdomen and trying to fix this for this, do this for this. Okay. That's why I try to get people away from that. I will tell you what the protocols are, but I'm trying to then take you away from them. So it's a little bit unfair, but you still have to do this thing where you kind of somehow memorize all these protocols and have them available at your fingertips at all times. You do need the protocols, okay? But you also need to throw them away and not be too influenced by them. Okay? So the question is, so this person had oketsu, adrenal, lung, cardiac, anxiety, worry. Okay? Which one of these is there one that I can do that will knock everything down? Okay? When I treat the abdomen, can I treat the abdomen bearing in mind the medical history, rather than treat each thing on its own? That's the biggest trick in the style. Okay? And then, of course, make sure the elbow also got better while you're at it. So you have this constant situation of you prioritizing what you want to do. You're figuring out, I think this is, at the bottom of this is they fell under a tail rope. Or at the bottom of this, I think it's because they come from a strong situation of thyroid issues in mother's family. And I think this is really, if I fix the thyroid, this is just a thought I have right now. I heard the medical history, I looked at the abdomen, I make sure I know how to, how to make pain in the elbow, even through my pressure or they moving it. And now I'm going, gee, I wonder, and let's say they show thyroid also, they have pressure pain, stomach 9 or below. Okay? Now I'm going, let me try a kidney point, see if it fixes the thyroid. and then lets me see if it fixes, how much of the abdomen it fixes. It doesn't have to fix everything, and it doesn't have to make everything 100%. But if it affects a fair amount of the points by at least 50%, I'm onto something. And then, by the way, this kidney point, what does it do for your elbow? Okay? So I'm looking at the medical history. How does it affect the abdomen? How can I clear the abdomen? And how can that affect their symptom? It's not an independent situation. We don't clear the abdomen for the sake of clearing the abdomen. No patient comes in, for clearing the abdomen unless you happen to be doing enemas or intestinal irrigation. Colonics, yeah. If you come for that, they're interested in you cleaning their abdomen. But if they didn't come for that, and most of our patients don't come for that, they don't come for abdominal findings to be cleared. It doesn't interest them in the least. Okay, this is your tool, and to understand it, because what happens is when you see what I do, it becomes very obsessive. It looks like all we're doing is clearing the abdomen. That's the most important thing. And in a way, some of us actually teach it that way. And there's a huge advantage of actually encouraging you to even practice that way for a while. There's a huge advantage to being able to say, I don't need to know jack shit. I don't need a lot of things. I just clear the abdomen, and you get better at that. And that will give you a tremendous amount of technique. There's a fair amount of people who very strongly teach it this way. Clear the abdomen. To me, unfortunately, it sounds a little bit like the Toyohari people who say, clear the pulse. But then the patient, they don't even, they get upset if you ask the patient, how's your neck? They came for neck pain, for Christ's sakes. They didn't come because they want to clean the pulse. Okay, some people do. They come for, maintenance, blah, blah, blah. I hear it's very good for me to have a nice pulse. The patient comes for an actual problem, wants that problem addressed. And they will have a certain tolerance. Every patient's different. Some patients will not tolerate even one visit without some relief. Some patients are very happy to come 2 or 3, but then they want to see something moving. And some patients, even after 2 or 3 treatments, if they get no results, they insist on coming. And of those, there's a certain percentage that suddenly after 10 treatments, something starts to move. You go, gee, I would fire them after the second treatment, which is, because it's, what do you say to a person that you got nothing moving after 2 or 3 treatments? It's not fair to keep them coming. But if they insist, hey, it's their prerogative, which supports them in some manner. I'm not here to determine what it is that they should do. Okay? And of those people, sometimes, yes, it is possible. So there is something, when I don't know how many people still do that nowadays, but I remember when we came out of school, there was a gold standard of telling people, try 10 visits. It was an era that was still very TCM oriented, and it was still the era in China when people were treating, they were treating the factory workers, nobody paid in China, so they were influenced by that style. And the style was you do 10 treatments, 1 treatment a day, then you stop for a week, and then you come back for a course of treatment was 10 treatments, basically. That was kind of an ideology. So we came with that, it was transmitted to us that you tell a patient, try for 10 visits. It's like, 10 visits, do you know how much money it is? Well, of course you know how much money it is. But, but think about the patient's time, too. That in the meantime, they can find another modality that might actually help them. Mm-hmm. So I think nowadays, it's a little less common. I think people are a little bit more gentle in suggesting how many treatments. I usually tell people, they call on the phone, I tell them, you have to try one and then see what you think, and then if I got no results whatsoever, nothing moved on the first treatment, I tell them, I'm happy to try one more, maybe I got it all wrong. And plus some people, not the majority, some people get better over the next day. So I don't know what's going to happen. If you don't mind coming back once more, I'm happy to try again. But if then still nothing moves, and by nothing moves, listen, some conditions you can't move the condition because you can't see the condition. Okay? If somebody has lupus and they don't have pain that day, or they don't have, like they're not feeling spacey that day. Okay? You can't say, well, there was no symptom to get you out of on the spot, but can I affect your abdomen? So that's my surrogate for understanding what I'm doing. If I'm affecting the abdomen, I'm assuming I'm affecting the person. Then the question is, am I affecting it for good or for bad? Or does it just look? So in other words, you can clear the abdomen, and their elbow is much better. They're happy. Tomorrow maybe the elbow comes back. You don't know. You can't give somebody a prognosis or an idea of how many treatments until the second visit. Because it's on the second visit that, number one, you find out how the abdomen is still going to be relatively the same on most people, and that's okay. Don't expect that if you clear the abdomen on one treatment, it stays cleared. It comes back. It's okay. But some things will be different. And secondly, did the symptoms stay better? Okay. If the symptoms stayed better the whole week, or it was like, oh wow, it was 80% better, and now it's at 60% of what it was, you pretty much figure out that what you did was you did a good job. Okay? You can add a little more, you can rethink something, but you don't have to do the whole thing from scratch and make a new strategy. But a person that says it was 100% better, sounds fabulous, for one day. Then the next day it came back at 50%. Then the second day it came back at 30%, at 70%, and now it's basically at 95% of what it was. Your strategy was not useful. Looked nice. You cleared everything, the patient was happy, but it didn't last. So you know that there's something in your strategy. It may be the right strategy to a point, but you're probably missing something quite elementary for that person. And now your struggle is to find out what the hell it is. And it's not always so simple. Because some people that is going to be how we do it. We've all had patients that tell you, any treatment I take is good for 2 or 3 weeks, and then everything comes back. And I've been through like 15 different modalities. And I know the story very well. They'll tell you, it's always like that. I go to someone, the beginning is like really good, and we're back to square one. Every so often you get a patient like that. So you do what you can with these things. There's not. You can only do what you can do. So, medical history, the abdominal palpation. Now for me, abdomen means abdomen and neck, and then I always do people on the back. I turn them over and do the back as well. I generally, for the most part, I don't palpate the back until I'm done with a front treatment. If you want to, you can palpate them on the back as well. I just find that it's too much, and then it's hard to confirm. The back you confirm on the back, it's just easier. Every so often there'll be, hormone violations of my rules. It's not like nothing's written in stone. So medical history, abdomen and neck, correlate that in your mind, come up with an idea of what you think is important, and now test. If I have an idea, I think it's because, say it's a tail, I think it's a T5 shift. Okay, their T5 is shifted, therefore they have a whole bunch of shunt disturbance in their stomach, because the stomach, the nerves to the stomach come from T5. I can justify all sorts of things because of I can have a whole story around the T5 problem. Okay, and it makes total sense in my head. Now what I need to do is first of all, do you have any pressure pain on T5? And if you do, okay, what do I think will release it? Okay. Let's say I think it's something to do with the autonomic nerve. Let's say I think it's a spinal problem, and let's say I decide it's a marrow issue. I'm just making up stories. That's not quite normally how I do it. I'm doing that on purpose. I press gallbladder 39 because it's a spine problem and to do with marrow, right? Gallbladder 39 fixes T5, fixes the whole abdomen. It's the greatest point since sliced bread now, and the symptom is much better. Okay? That meant my idea was correct. I had an idea. T5, the shift in T5 is the root of the problem. I can have an idea thyroid condition that was inherited from mom is the root of the problem. Whatever the idea is, test it on the body. Do I have, now, I can have an idea. You lost your wisdom teeth when you were 1 year old. This is the root of your problem. Okay? Now you can say it's really a stupid, idea to begin with, and I'm not saying I've ever had a patient that lost the wisdom teeth at 1 year old. Now, my biggest problem, let's say it totally makes sense. I came up with an idea that totally makes sense. Now, my biggest problem is I have no point to use for losing your wisdom teeth at 1 year old. It's basically, it either becomes a useless idea, and I might as well find something else. In other words, the diagnosis is not useful unless I have a treatment for it. Okay, so that's where the protocols are very useful. You have certain protocols and you're going, gee, I wonder if this protocol will fit it, and then you can test the protocol for it. Okay. Or now you're going to say, no matter what, everybody else is laughing at me, but I am convinced that losing your wisdom teeth at 1 year old is your root issue. I am just bloody convinced, and I am now on a search to find a point. One, by hook or by crook, I'm going to find something that is going to fix wisdom teeth removed at 1 year old, lost, whatever the story was, at 1 year old. Does that make sense? And this is where it gets really creative and kind of fun. And this is where your capacity to, which is difficult for most of us Westerners, to learn point names, is going to come up, is going to really pay off. Because you'll have all sorts of weird names and points, and if you keep doing what I do, which is I keep looking at this stuff constantly. I don't know all the names, and I do not speak Chinese. In a moment you'll see me write on the board, and it looks as if I know something in Chinese. I know nothing, okay, honestly. But I play constantly, and then you get all sorts of interesting things. So one of the things that I've worked with a lot recently is I looked at the character Shuang, suspended, okay? And we have a bunch of Shuangs. Gallbladder 39 is a Shuang, okay, Shuang Zhong, okay? You have 2 gallbladder points here, I'm not sure what the numbers are, but one of them is hanging hair, which I think they mean like, if you have like sideburns or something, they're hanging hairs, but one of them is hanging skull. And then the dew point that's level with the Sanjiao Shu, L1, is the hanging pivot, Shuang Shu. Okay, so you have a bunch of Shuans in the body. The character Shuan is the heart underneath, and it got kind of like interrupted or suspended. Okay. And then I had a patient that had irregular pulse. Like the pulse, but irregularly, what do they call it? Regularly, irregular, or whatever, skip and beat thing. And I was like wondering, it's like it's a suspended heart, literally, right? So I was pressing first gallbladder 39 because that's my big one kind of thing. And all abdomen, everything gets better. And then I decided, okay, try the suspended brain, and that also did the same thing, and he got better. So then I'm starting to test, what can I do with Shuan for people with irregular pulse? And then the next phase is, what can I do with Shuan with people with other suspended consciousness issues? Because Shin, heart, is both the mind, the consciousness, and the actual heart. It's a double meaning in the Chinese world. So that's how we start looking at things. Another example of things like that, which again is right now under experimentation, is, there's all this talk about how the gut bacteria is changing our moods and it's affecting everything. That's like the latest thing in medicine. This is the fashion right now. We're all doing that. And I'm not scoffing at it, and actually I think it's very true. Of course, in 20 years we'll say, well, that was just part of the story, and there's the whole other part of the story that we totally forgot, like, how long your fingernails are is really the thing that's most important in medicine, whatever we're going to. No, every generation comes with their ideas, and it's totally fine. So, large intestine channel, Large intestine one is called Shuang, but Shang means merchant. Okay, but then the next one, large intestine 2 and 3, they're called second space and third space. Okay, and this space is like the light that comes through a door. Okay, so there's some opening. Now in small intestine, what you see is you see a before and after, in front and behind, Now who has, if there's a second and a third space, we can assume that large intestine 1 is probably the first space, right? Because they're saying second space, third space. And they do not mean second point, third point. Sorry to Mr. Andy Ellis. I mean, that's not an explanation of a point named from my point. It's possible that somebody did. I have no idea what to call these points. Second space, third space. Well, they would have gone to fourth space and they would have said, why do we bother with these names? Those Westerners in 2,000 years, they're much smarter than we are. Let's just number all the points. They would have totally done that. Believe me, it's just as easy for the Chinese to say number 1, 2, 3, 4 than, it's harder. No, it's hard for us to learn the point names, but it's just as hard for them. If they just want 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, they'll be just as happy as we are to do it that way. So I somehow doubt, even though I think the word probably people have probably said, let's just, throw some name at it. But a fair amount of it came from someone's understanding of something. They understood something. So I'm thinking second and third space. Who has 3 spaces in the body? Besides the Sanjiao, which doesn't exist in the body as we know it. Westerners, okay? So who has 3 spaces in the body? And happens to be in the large intestine channel. The large intestine. 1, 2, 3. Ascending, across, and descending colons. Right? So it's kind of interesting that the only channel where you have number 2, number 3, that suggests that there's 3 divisions to the organ that it's dealing with is on the large intestine. Is it possible that large intestine 1, 2, or 3 will affect the intestinal gut, the intestinal flora in the gut? And the same thing with before and after. Maybe they thought of the small intestine as maybe more, depth-wise. I'm not sure, But, because that's another place where you're looking at gut flora conceivably. So these are, again, things that I'm looking at when I want to do, and I don't have a protocol for it. Because, first of all, we can't use all 3 together according to the way we work. But we can use metal and water we can use together. So large intestine 1 and 2 or small intestine 1 and 2 we can use together. But 2 and 3 is not something we like doing. Okay, because now you're talking about water and wood point together. And they kind of contradict each other. You're giving the body two sort of separate messages. Okay? So that's when you have a patient and you have a story and you're convinced that this story is the root of the problem. You want to get to the root of the problem, but you've never had the opportunity, you've never heard of a protocol for this problem, i.e. wisdom tooth moved at 1-year-old. Okay? What can you come up with? Okay? And that's kind of a challenge. Okay? Now that you have a story and you have some points to use with that story, press on those points and see if they affect the rest of what you found in general and the actual symptom. Can you prove to yourself that your story is correct? That's what the system is about. Does that make sense? Is everybody kind of with me up to now? Even though it was very theoretical? Okay. Now we have to actually do something practically, like look at how do we do this in practice. So poking abdomen, basically, it's much more invasive than most Japanese people do. Okay? In Japan, like in China, there's a way to write case studies which says something like, you have, the patient presents with this, the tongue looks like that, the pulse looks like that, the differential diagnosis, they may give you 10 questions, and then they'll say the differential diagnosis is X, Y, and Z. Spleen tumor deficiency with dampness. And the treatment principle is, drain dampness, fortify the spleen, whatever, something like that, And then they give you what they did. And very common, you look at that list of, it's usually herbs, and you're looking at the herbs and it's like, drain dampness, tonify the spleen. I don't see maybe one herb in here, and the rest is like other stuff, because that's the nature. They have to write a principle of diagnosis based on Tom Paul's 10 questions and differential diagnosis. They have to come up with that, and a principle of treatment. Sometimes even the principle of treatment will not match the diagnosis, by the way, in some case studies. But usually they'll try and make it match somehow. But then the treatment doesn't have to match. But they're telling you what the treatment is, and these herbs happen to be good for this. Okay? So in Japan, there's a very similar sort of obligatory situation. If you're describing what you do, you must talk about the pulse, you must talk about the abdomen, no tongue. So every Japanese, so it makes it look like all Japanese practitioners spoke abdomen. It's not true. Okay? And when they do, it's very kind of light and superficial. We actually, you want to get up to about 1 knuckles inward, okay, when you press. And you want to press, this is me, you want to press with your body, not with your fingers. You press with your fingers, it's not comfortable. You want to transmit the weight into the hand. The hand doesn't move. Okay, I'll show you the moment. Then we have a map of the abdomen. Okay, we say, if you have pressure pain here, it means this. If you have pressure pain here, it means that. And what I will promise you is that tomorrow morning, we will start with the full map. In other words, don't be frustrated if you didn't get it all that you feel like, oh, but I don't have the full map, because by tomorrow, this time, 10 o'clock tomorrow, you will. Okay, that's what I usually do, because it's a little bit like a child that you teach ABC, when they learn a foreign language that way, they tend not to speak that language. A child listens to mommy and daddy talk, and they just gather the language somehow. So I'd much rather you see things, and the first day will be a little bit more chaotic, but just get some tools, and it will be frustrating. And then tomorrow, now we can talk ABC. If we start with A and B and C, they don't make sense yet. They have to have some sort of context. Is that fair? So I'll give you some of the findings, just so that we have a little bit of common language. So, in the abdomen, so I generally start poking around spleen 13-14 area on the left side. In general, I stand on the left side of the patient. This is a mannerism of mine. I can justify it, whatever, it really doesn't matter. I start with the left spleen 9 because for most people, unless they have descending colon problem, that's going to be relatively free. I can pretty much guarantee it, since I know what the medical history is. I know that for this person, chances are this area here is going to be free. Okay? I want them to feel my fingers. They need to know. Most people have never been palpated. Their abdomen hasn't been palpated before. How do they know what your fingers feel like? They may say, it may be horrible pain, but they go, well, it's supposed to be like that. Or they may be, everywhere, because they're just kind of like, they don't know what the baseline is. You need, a first-time patient, you need to give them a baseline. Okay? Then, the next place I look at is, we call Oketsu, left stomach 26-27, plus kind of below kidney 16. So it extends towards the middle at the top part, and it can be any part of this area. Okay? We call that Oketsu. Okay? Which basically means, it's translated as stagnant blood. Okay? The tsu is like shui. Okay? But it's really not the kind of stagnant blood that when you're thinking of Tao and Honghua kind of thing. It's really more like the blood is sluggish. Okay, things are just slow. What happens is the liver holds a lot of blood, not just in Chinese medicine, in real life. Okay, not Western medicine, not Chinese medicine. The liver is a very big sponge that holds blood. The portal vein comes into the liver from the left, relatively left side. Okay. The portal vein brings in the foodstuffs on the small intestine to the liver to be detoxified and broken down enzymatically. Then from the liver, that goes back up to the heart, okay, and then just circulate. If the blood is sort of sluggish, okay, not clotted, which is what TCM tends to mean, would be the more equivalent TCM stagnation of blood. If the blood is sort of slow and sluggish, the blood that comes to the liver from the left side is going to be slow. So there's going to be a piling up. There's going to be like like a traffic accident happened in the liver, kind of thing. And then there's going to be a backup, and the backup shows pressure pain on this side. So yes, you can say that to some extent it relates to the liver, but it's mostly related to the quality of blood. The blood is sluggish. Okay? In the 90s, okay, now I just want to make it clear. Almost everyone who teaches this style tends to start teaching Oketsu, adrenal, lung reflex. The first one we teach is always Oketsu. Okay? It's convenient. There was a period in the 90s where Oketsu was God. It's like, we thought that treating Oketsu was like the smartest thing ever, the most important thing ever, and believe me, it worked on many patients. And then suddenly the 2000s came and we're not finding it as much, and when we find it, we don't bother treating it. It's kind of weird. So to understand that there are different phases in every practitioner's life, But we still teach this because it's one of those very simple things to teach, and there's a clarity. If you find Oketsu, what do? You do left liver 4 and left lung 5. And if you really want to do the 100% protocol to the nth degree, you can add what we call the immune points. The immune points are between longitudinal 10 and 11, but they're on the edge of the bone. We'll talk about those in a moment. Okay? So now you have a protocol. Okay? You found Oketsu, left stomach 26, 27, possibly below kidney 16 on the left side. What do? You do liver 4, lung 5. Okay. Now, there's going to be a bunch of problems if you just do that, basically based on the fact that our liver 4 is in a different location. Okay, and this is actually really, really important. Okay, so most textbooks sort of go, this is stomach 41 and this is liver 4. Well, I have news for you, and I can prove it in the classics. Okay, so don't think that I just was born yesterday. I have. Ling Shu 10 talks about all the 5 Shu points, and only one of them, liver 4, doesn't stop to say something about. And what it says is, first it talks about the location. It says liver 4 is short or half. It's short 1 sun of the ankle bone. Okay? Which means it's 1 sun below. Now, if you try, if you go here, there's nothing here. There's a hole because that's where the bones meet. So anywhere between, you can go in with a needle as deep as you want and do whatever you want in that location that Deadman has. Okay, this one. And it's going to feel to you like, wow, there's a point here. I mean, there's a lot of space. It may feel juicy. Okay? But if you go a thumb below, you will find, if you go 1 thumb below, you will feel that there's a little gumminess, there's a puffy tissue, and that's what you want to get. For me, acupuncture is all about breaking down the connective tissue. going into puffy area, gummy areas, nodular areas, and breaking it down, moving it. Okay? That's my idea of what acupuncture is. So that's why the needles don't have to be very deep. Okay? So liver 4 is once and below. Lung 5, their standard description in the text is they say lateral to the tendon. Okay? And strangely enough, they say on the pericardium, medial to the tendon. Now look what happens if you go medial to the tendon. If this looks to you like that's the pericardial channel, it doesn't to me. Okay? This, you can see this dip here, that to me is pericardium 4, 3 fingers below. That's when we say pericardium 4, we mean this dip. On most people, you're going to have to go lightly. They're not going to be able to show this dip. I happen to be built in a way that it just shows. Okay? If I take pericardium, do you see how the channel is here and pericardium 3 is like totally off the channel? What the hell? Like, who came up with this? It just makes no sense. It's like the people who like the pericardium, you know, because I think it's a mistake in a textbook. You know, they say that, you know, pericardium is between the second and third metacarpal or whatever it is, and they put it here. Well, it's not in line with the channel, damn it. It makes absolutely no sense. Lao Gong, for me, needs to be in the center of the palm. It's going to be between the third and fourth, you know, bones. Okay? Our lung 5, in the same way, it's not just next to the tendon. We actually take it slightly out, and you will feel there's just more substance there. There is something there. There's one of those, again, you can call it gummy. It's actually a tighter gummy. It's not. The gummy at level 4, for example, you know, every point has its own sort of character, or tends to. Liver 4 is mushy. This is not mushy. This tends to be tight. Okay? So little by little, you start recognizing. And for me, lung 5, I can take a teeny bit above, up to half its own, not a huge amount, and a teeny bit below. One of them will be more effective. How do you know which one? Which one does a better job in the body? Say if you're trying to release, you know, the kidney line for bronchial issues, which one is going to release this better, you know, a little below? Because if you press on it and they say, no, it's the same, or 20% better, you go a little bit below, maybe, and you find, oh, wow, there's like more stuffy here, you know, and then they go, oh, wow, 80% better. Which point do you want to needle? The one that did 20% better or the one that did 80% better? Obviously, you want to do the one that did 80% better, but how are you going to know if you don't try it out? Okay? So our lung 5 is a little bit more lateral. Okay? So you've got your first protocol conquered. Okay? You know, okay, so next one actually, well, rather than going to, okay, let's do immune. Immune is on the other side, right side, stomach 26, 27. And here is where things get complicated. Okay? Right side stomach 26, 27 can reflect a bunch of different things. Number one, it can reflect immune. First of all, it can reflect appendix issues. Okay? Because the appendix is basically underneath there. Okay? So maybe they have chronic appendicitis, or they can have digestion issues because it's ileocecal valve. Okay? So digestion, it can reflect the lungs. According to 5 elements of the abdomen, okay, what you have is, you should have the center around the navel should be spleen, okay, this should be heart, this should be kidney, this side should be lung, this side should be liver. Okay, even though the liver physically on the top exists on the right side, it reflects on the left. And we justify it by saying because of the poor thing. So this is a reflection of the lungs, or immunity, or digestion. Now there's a strong correlation, okay? Large intestine and lung are obviously related, okay? But also, immunity, if it's on top of the intestines, the largest portion of the immune system is in the intestines. So that's why this reflects immunity. But there's a fourth thing that this can represent, which is pelvic shift. Okay? Somebody who's, their sacrum is shifted and they're standing with one hip up or something like that. It's going to show here. And you're not going to, the only way to confirm this is by pressing on the sacroiliac ligament. And seeing if that, there's nothing on the front that I can make this better if it's a pelvic shift. Okay, it's not going to show. Okay. So I have to determine which one, what does it represent? If it represents, well, if it represents digestion, I have a bunch of options, so it's not so, there's no one point for it. But if I believe it represents immunity, immune point should resolve it. Now, immune point, the reflex for immune, to check the immune point, is officially behind Sanjiao 16, behind the SCM. Okay? So, because that's the gland area. Originally, the immune point was called tonsillitis point. People who've had tonsils removed, no, that was his point. Okay? So, they may have discomfort. Yeah, now, when they're lying down, I'm pressing into the SCM towards the nose. And they go, ooh, not comfortable. And you can feel like a big gummy, sort of like balloon there or something. Okay? Then you test the immune point, same side. Most of what we do is same side. Okay? And the immune point is, it's never large intestine 11, and it's never as low as large intestine 10. It's somewhere in between, and it's on the edge of the bone. And you will find the way the muscle adheres to the bone, it has like bumps in it. Some of these places where the muscle adheres like this to the bone are related to immunity. One of them is the PSIS. Okay? Now that may still show us how much intestines and immunity are correlated, because PSIS is level with large intestinal shoe, isn't it? Okay, so it's kind of interesting that we can always find different correlations, and it just helps us make things up. You okay? All right. So that area is one area that's immunity, and under the scapular spine, so below small intestine 12. Okay? Okay, under the scapular spine, we say is an area that's related to the lymph nodes and releases lymph nodes. Okay, it relates to immunity. So there's a bunch of places where things are attached to bones that relate to immunity. So this we call the immune point. So it's not really officially large intestine channel, right? Would be here, but my bone is here. There's a good difference here. This is much more Sanjiao channel. So, in the old days, and sometimes you'll still see that. Kiiko is very good at making up point names that are funny or kind of like they're memorable. So she used to call this triple intestinal 10. Okay, so, because you don't forget things like that. The problem with that is that sometimes there's points that, the name just got so fabulous that everybody remembers the name, and then the point was abandoned like years ago. So there's one that we call magic thyroid point. And everybody loves, because everybody's heard of the magic thyroid point, and magic, it's like everybody wants the magic. It's like, it's a useless point basically, or maybe it's not useless, but I've never seen Kiiko actually use it, and I've never used it myself, and I don't really care. So I can't say it's magical. Okay, it's the magic thyroid in the sense that it's a point that doesn't exist. It has its magic. Everybody loves it, but nobody seems to do anything with it. Okay, it's where the neck and the shoulder meet. And my understanding of it is that people with thyroid, they're supposed to have, pain here.
Just to clarify, what you're saying. So, if a person has the immune reflex on the abdomen, then I should check SI12 area and the...
No, definitely check Sanjiao 16.
Okay, and don't another confirmation point? Or as...
okay. So Sanjiao 16 will be sometimes you'll only find Sanjiao 16, you won't find right stomach 27. Oh, there's one more capacity for right side stomach 26, 27, which I have to say. But mostly you will find it here, not necessarily in the abdomen, but you might find in the abdomen when you use the immune point. The original thinking for immune point is immune point releases Sanjiao 16 area. Okay, but it also releases lots of other things. One of the things it releases is right side 26, 27. Right side 26, 27 also is a reflex for, you can call it women's reflex. Women happen to have a much stronger affinity for right-sided issues. I can explain that in a little bit. Again, it has to do with the fact that women's constitution is blood. That's a standard phrase in TCM. Blood side is on the right side. And I know you're going to kill me for saying this, but this is how we think. Left side is chi side, right side is blood side. And I'll show you that in a little bit, just because I want to finish this. Okay? Lots of women will show rights. Oh, in the last 10 years, it wasn't true 20 years ago in my experience. I don't know what other people had in their clinics. I don't know. There's not enough collaboration out there for all of us to correlate our findings, unfortunately. But my recollection is that was not a super standard finding. It's much more common finding in the last 10 years. Right side, stomach 26, 27 for women. And that relates usually to kidney. Okay. Possibly hormone, but it has something to do with kidney. Okay. Kiiko has a whole explanation for that, and I can go through that in a little bit why it is, but it's relatively theoretical from my, I'm happy to give it to you in a little bit. So here is the reflex where you have many options on how to resolve it according to what you believe it means. Is it immune? Is it lung? Is it a pelvic shift where you have to press the sacroiliac joint? Maybe lung 8 will do a good job for it. The advantage of lung 8 is that it does a good job on the left side, even though the pain is on the right side. If I'm standing on the left side, I can press the point and the reflex in the abdomen at the same time, as opposed to having to go to the other side. So that's a cute advantage. Is it digestion, which means that, well, first of all, if the person, this is another big rule that we have, another big finding that we kind of like zoom onto, appendix. Appendix removal is kind of a big deal for us, and it's fairly common. Okay? Appendix is spleen 5 and spleen 9. Primarily spleen 9 would be the big one. Okay. If the appendix is actually inflamed currently, spleen 5 would be just as important. Okay? But anybody who's had their appendix removed is a spleen 9 type. Okay? So if this reflects digestion, in terms of intestinal digestion, we would try spleen 9, but we have a whole bunch of other options. We have what's called stomach chi points, which are the bumps along the stomach line. And I'm talking about the stomach line being right next to the tibia. Okay, many people have bumps here, and some people you can see the bumps. It's very common, these bumps. What it means is that the stomach line is not smooth, right? The stomach channel is not smooth, and so we call it lack of stomach chi. Okay, so historically, sorry, this is again non-linear. Historically, the way this worked is, stomach chi came into effect, at least in my life, this is a good point for these. Those bumps between stomach 40 and 41, nowadays we say it's between stomach 36 and 41. But the thought was, how come between stomach 40 and stomach 41 there's no points? And it's supposed to be the most important area, below the knees, below the elbows. It's supposed to be so important. How come there's no points? You have half the leg on one of the most important channels in the body, and there's no points. And the points above it, they're called the Sea of Chong, right? The lower half of the small intestine, large intestine, that's the Sea of Chong. And yet below it, nobody gives a damn. It makes no sense whatsoever. So now because stomach 41 is the fire point on the earth channel, it is officially the tonification point of the stomach channel. Not earth and earth. Stomach 36 is not, even though that's what everybody uses. It's stomach 40. If you're talking about, if you're a 5-element person, stomach 41 is going to be a huge point. Stomach 41 is also a huge point because it's your whole axis of the whole gate falls into stomach 41. Whatever you do at stomach 41 is going to affect the body. Okay? So, my understanding was, Nagano used stomach 41 for many years, because it makes, and then he started saying, hey, what the hell's going on above it? Like, what is this so-called dead area? And then he said, how come all these people have bumps? And what he said was that you have a kind of pulse, because in the classics it says, the pulse should have root, it should have shen, and it should have stomach chi. What does stomach chi mean? It's subject to interpretation. Nobody really knows. Okay. What Nagano said is stomach chi is a pulse that doesn't have a movement to it. A pulse should have, like, we might call it a slippery quality. It should have some rolling that moves towards, ideally, it moves towards lana. Okay? So it has a movement to it. There are pulses that feel like they're just pushing up, but you don't feel a forward movement in them. Do you know what I'm talking about? That pulse he called a pulse that does not have stomach chi. It doesn't have that rolling forward movement quality. It just, it's not what he's talking about is not the opposite of wild. You know, he's not saying the pulse that just moves up is wild. Okay, because we have a tendency to say wiry or slippery. As if there, you know, there's only two qualities in pulse. Okay. It's a pulse that simply is lacking the rollingness, the movement. Okay? That's a pulse that's lacking stomach chi. And when you press on the stomach chi line, you can actually feel the pulse change. Now, because I'm not someone of the statute of Nagano, that is not my way of confirming that point. So when I first learned that point, it was like, this is a good point for knees. And we still use it for knees, although quite honestly, I use stomach 41 a lot more for knees. Knee problems. Okay? Sorry?
I missed that. Can you say that again? You said for knees or?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
What you were just saying.
Oh,
I couldn't hear that.
originally, stomach chi was the point that I was introduced to as a great point for knees. That was its first and only function. And then a few months later, it became like, okay, no, because it was the period, as I understand it, that Nagano was obsessed with stomach chi points. You know, it was like in the early 90s. And I nowadays use stomach 41 much more as my default point for knee pain, not so much stomach chi. Stomach chi, then we learned stomach chi is good for when that pulse does not have a movement, we use that point. Okay, now you don't need to use just one stomach chi, there can be 3 or 4 bumps that you choose to needle. Okay. And it's really good, for example, for neuropathy. So we have many, many uses for stomach chi points. Okay? One of those uses, it might be when they have digestive issues, stomach chi might be one of the points that does a good job to clear right side 26, 27 because it's digestion. But honestly, it will be a support point you probably find in spleen 9 is the one, if it's digestion. But there could be others. So you see that there's one reflex here that has multiple solutions. The next, now we did immune point also. Now the next big finding is below kidney 16 on both sides. Okay, so kidney 16 is center with the navel. This is just below. Now this is the only area where I would tell you want to be precise. Okay. It can't be too far out, it can't be too far below. This is pretty precise. Yeah.
Sorry, before you get off the immune reflex, can I just ask, remember like how Kiiko uses immune reflex, that whole extrovert, the whole small intestine 11 and 1041 for digestive inflammation or yeast? Okay. Remember that she was doing that? Do you do that in clinic?
I use stomach 41. Okay. What you're talking about is, okay, small intestine 11 is a good point that we use for bowel issues, digestive issues in general. So that would mean liver, gallbladder, stomach, and well, stomach to some extent, and small intestine issues. Stomach 41, if you take stomach 41, there's the stomach 41 that you needle towards kidney 6, and it's 1 tendon over from liver 4. Okay? And then if you go over 1 tendon, so there's 3 tendons here. So you can say I go over 1 tendon from gallbladder 41. If you take that stomach 41, so there are 2 different points, okay? And needle it towards gallbladder 41, so the direction is different. That's considered the anti-inflammatory stomach 41. So if you have yeast, it's like you have inflammation. So stomach 41 for inflammation, and then small intestine 11 for bowels in general, for digestion in general. And immune also affects, affects immunity around the digestive organs. So yeah, I do some of it. I would say, I can't say that in my clinical practice I use lots of that stomach. I use lots of stomach 41 regular one towards kidney 6, but the one towards gallbladder 40, on occasion. It's not like my, my obsession.
I think that it just seemed like, for using, and in that lecture at least, or for like a little bit, she was really looking at the small intestine 11 area to clear the immune reflex for people with digestive issues.
Yes.
And then she hasn't really done it with.
Yeah, okay. So this is
I
my,
love it, so.
okay. So here's my suggestion on these things. Any teacher you follow, and well, there's a few things. First of all, when Kiiko teaches often, especially nowadays, she's trying to get a certain, because by now there's a fair amount of people who've been following her for a fair amount of time, so there's a sort of obligation to make the more advanced people kind of worth their while. They don't need to sit through a lecture like this 20 million times, how many years are going, So she needs to promote, and also from her own perspective, I'm assuming, she wants to promote her latest ideas, her latest interest. So there was a period, I think it was about 3 years ago, maybe 4, where small intestine 11 came, and everything was small intestine 11. Okay. Now the problem with that, and it disappeared very fast. And so what I do is I always observe and see which points really stayed, both in my clinic and in my observation of other, of Kiiko, to see like did this really stay? Because there's been all sorts of points that was the magical point for everything. And then it's like, and then sometimes she would say, Kiiko, what about this point? And she'll like look at you and then, oh, that one, yes, that. It was like she forgot that this point even existed. It was fun for, we had our waltz for 6 months, we had our fling for 6 months, and now bye-bye, I've got someone new. So points are like that also. So my sense is that small intestine 11 was a little bit of a fling. It has a certain value. I'm not going to say it was totally useless, but to say that it's at the core of the, of what I use, yeah. And maybe at some point I'll do a reverse method. I'll talk about the points that I really done. So things like what are just really core. Immune has not changed for 25 years. We're still doing immune. Adrenal, we're still doing. Sanjiao 8 is not quite 25 years, it came a little bit later, but very soon after. We're still doing. Whether Sanjiao 8 or Sanjiao 5, but we're still doing it. So there's certain things that are staples and have kept over the years, and certain things, so it's good to remember, well, maybe we'll work on this patient. Maybe this patient is retro 1997. Maybe this patient is retro 2013, fashion. It's like we don't know. So it's good to have these things, but also to accept that fashions change. I mean, for example, sorry for the other people, Red 9 pulse was like a non-finding in the 90s. We didn't talk about it, we didn't find it, we didn't, and then came, we used to say pressure pain on Red 9 was sadness. We treated with right stomach 24, okay? If you wanted to go into why right stomach 24, right stomach 24 is called slippery flesh gait. But we didn't talk about the fact that Red 9 had a slipperiness, that you felt the pulse there. So we didn't really, and then came the idea that there's a pulse on Red 9 possibly. Okay? And then years later, suddenly everybody has Red 9 pulse, and now Red 9 pulse does not mean sadness, it means weak dantian. Things change, just like what Oketsu disappeared from the general, like, wow, this is a fabulous thing to do.
A couple of times this year, come back.
Yeah, so, and that's the thing, that as a practitioner, you're scratching your brain and going, like, gee, I wonder what the hell is going on, like, should I, was this a mistake to, like, let it go? Like, sometimes we throw the baby with the bathwater, and then we're going, okay, let's save the baby. The bathwater can go, but the baby should, how can I use the baby itself? So, it's like, you have to accept the fact that, what you see over, and, my understanding also that people who study with Nagano, they'll say, oh, there was a period, like he only did this, and then he did, no, he only did stomach chi, and no, he only did triple warmer 8, he only, he was interested in certain things and researching them and pushing them, which basically tells you that there's no one way to treat. Nobody says, oh, when he was doing stomach chi, he was getting shitty results. You're not hearing that, you're just hearing he was doing something. They're all paying great reverence. Oh, he was fabulous, he was doing, but they're saying, but what I saw him really concentrate on this. Does that make sense? So this adrenal, 4 o'clock, 8 o'clock, it's just below kidney 16, and if it shows pressure, and then there we call this adrenal reflex. And this is one of the staples of this style. Adrenal is one of the things that you'll see happening again and again and again, just like SCM. Okay, just like immune reflex, Sanjal 16. For me, my understanding of, now there's a few other reflexes for, we've added other reflexes that we can use for adrenal type. One of them is pressure pain on kidney 2. Okay? And another one of them is possibly the SCM shows. Okay, so we can say that there's more reflexes for adrenal. But the main one, the original main one, is below kidney 16. My understanding of that is that when kidney is affected by fear, kidney channel, it comes up the inner leg, goes into the perineum, goes up the spine, and then in DU4, it moves down to meet the kidneys and the bladder. And then there's a branch that comes up and ends up circling the throat. Now, since most of us don't really study or care enough about the internal channel pathway, and we learn the point numbers, we're going kidney comes up the perineum, and then we go kidney 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and to 27. That is not correct in my opinion, because when you read the channel description clearly goes up the spine in the back, or in front of the spine, and then goes forward and moves down, and that to me is the representation of kidney 16 downwards to kidney 11. And at kidney 16 there's another branch. So at kidney 16 the channel can separate. One goes down, one goes up. If you have a shock, what will happen is fear grabs the energy down. You have a shock, the kidney channel splits. So there'll be like in the shock there'll be a kind of thing, right? And it will show just below kidney 16. That's that adrenal exhaustion, fear, shock reflex. Okay? That the channel got separated from the shock. Okay? Got balanced or whatever. The original treatment for we call this 4 o'clock, 8 o'clock, because if REN 9 is 12 o'clock, and REN 7 is 6 o'clock, and 16 is 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock, it's below 3 o'clock is 4 o'clock. Below 9 o'clock is 4 o'clock, so 8 o'clock, so it's just a clock. Okay. If you have this, what we do is kidney 6, and kidney 6 we needle towards the Achilles. Okay? We don't needle it in. The needle, it's superficial and towards the Achilles. Kidney 6 plus kidney 27. Okay? Since then, yeah, sorry.
So is the pressure pain below kidney 16, you need to find it bilaterally?
Okay, that's a very interesting question. I would say I would prefer for adrenal that it be bilateral. However, okay, here's the problem. Here's the differences in opinions here. I believe that you don't have to find them both. Ideally you do, but you need to treat both sides. Kiiko used to agree with me, and she clearly does not now, and she clearly does one-sided adrenal treatments. Okay? I disagree with that for the following reason. If no one's system, as far as I can tell, has one side adrenal deficiency, but the other side is totally fine. It's impossible. They work together, even though there are two adrenal glands. Now, even if somebody had some weird disease on, say, on the right side, and it only shows on the right side, And the other adrenal gland is supposed to be okay. At one point, that adrenal gland is going to be pulled upon and therefore get exhausted also. So, and since generally speaking, so that can happen, let's say you have a tumor or cyst on one side and not on the other. Generally speaking, adrenal exhaustion is something that's going to affect both. Now, it may not reflect on the body on both sides. So, I may not be able to find it one side or the other, but I should assume that it is. So, it's almost like how I used to talk about prevention. You know, I call it sometimes insurance. You know, if you find one side for certain symptoms, treat the other side also, because you don't know what will happen. You don't know what's hiding. So, for example, stroke is one of those things. If a person had a stroke on one side and you just treat the side that was affected, don't you think there's just as high a chance that they're going to get a stroke on the other? There's a reason why they got a stroke. Treat the other side for prevention. Okay. Hello. So, no problem, have a seat. So, adrenal, I tend to treat both sides. Now, your options are, you have kidney 6 and always kidney 27. The way kidney 27, by the way, kidney 27 is called Fu Shu, the shu point for the Fu organs. Kidney 16 is called Huang Shu, the buried or the missing organ shu. Okay, there is one more shu in the body that is not on the bladder channel. I think it's a small just one. There's Nao shu, okay, shoulder shu. Okay, otherwise there's no shu points except these two and bladder shu points by name. Okay, so the notion of shu is clearly reserved for special points. And so kidney 16 is a special point, and kidney 27 is a special point. And there's something in the Nanjing that talks about front shu points. They talk about back shu points and they talk about front shu points, and it seems to be here. They don't tell you which is which. Okay, so you have to do the calculation. You basically have to go from the back and calculate the same way, and it's only going to exist by element. In other words, either for the Zang organs or the Zang and the Fu together. You're not getting 10 shu points here. You're only getting 5 because you have 5 intercostal spaces you can work with. Okay? And kidney 27 is considered the shu of the Fu organs, or the master of all of these. But for Nagano, kidney 27 was considered a point to subdue the parathyroid. He said two things that I'm aware of about kidney 27. One is it subdues the parathyroid, and two, it creates a sympathetic reaction in the body. Okay? So, think about it this way. When the gonads, or adrenals and gonads kind of come together. Okay, they cooperate with each other. When the gonads go down, so think about it in women, ovaries, function of the ovaries go down, what happens? You go into menopause, you get osteoporosis. Why? Because the parathyroid got active, and the active parathyroid leaches calcium out of the blood. Right? So we're seeing that weak gonads, or weak adrenals, tends to come with too active a parathyroid. Therefore, if we're tonifying the gonads, or the adrenals, with kidney 6, we should support it by suppressing the hyperactivity or the possible hyperactivity of the parathyroid. Okay? Therefore, kidney 6 plus 27. Okay? Instead of kidney 6, you can use any kidney point you want under the knee, and we still call it adrenal treatment. Okay? So, that can be, for example, if you have kidney 2 pain, okay, you press on kidney 2, actually we don't press on kidney 2, we sort of rub it, because it's an area. Okay? If they have pain on kidney 2, we do kidney 7 and 10, because we have this idea. So this is one of the things, there's nothing you got out of this class except this one and a few others, which I will mention. It's this principle: if the fire point on the channel is painful, treat the metal and water points of that channel. Fire point is painful, treat metal and water. water overcomes fire. Metal is the mother of water, therefore helps water overcome fire. So metal water for overcoming fire. In the case of the yang channels, it's always going to be the Jing well and the yin spring points of the metal water. In the case of the yin channels, it's a little different, but they often the angle and the knee point. In the case of kidney, it's kidney 7 and 10. It's metal water. Okay, so now this principle of metal water to overcome fire, you'll see in a bunch of places, but it's we especially like it in the kidney. It's almost dictates in the kidney channel and in the pericardium channel. So you will see me say use pericardium, and I'm not telling you which point. Okay, what it means, pericardium to me means press pericardium 8. Okay, is there pain on pericardium 8 on pressure? Yes, there is pain. Use pericardium 3 in the middle between the tendons, in the hole, not on the side. And that's the water point. Pericardium 3 is the water point. And the middle point is pericardium 5. Okay? So pericardium 3 and 5 if pericardium 8 has pressure pain. If pericardium 8 has no pressure pain, you have two options. You can use pericardium 6, or you can use pericardium 4, 3 fingers below 3. Okay? Our pericardium 4 is 3 fingers below pericardium 3. It's different from TCM. How do you know which one? You already know there's no pressure pain in pericardium 8. You're not doing pericardium 5 and 3 and 5. Are you going to choose 6 or are you going to use 4? Which one will you use? Up to you. Currently, the fashion is pericardium 6. For the most part, Kiiko will use 6 right now, as I understand it. If you're going with Avi's fashion is still pericardium 4. But what I do is I check against the abdomen, and if there's nothing left in the abdomen to check, I'll find something in the neck and go, which one does a better job, 6 or 4? Whichever one does a better job, that's the one I'll choose. Yes?
So when you say pericardium 8, are you relating it to the adrenals?
No. This was a separate subject. The subject was really, when we find a fire point that's active, we use the metal in the water. Okay, and it's especially true with kidney channel and pericardium channel. With the other channels, you can needle other points, not the metal water, and still be relatively okay. With kidney and pericardium, where it's almost like super dogmatic. You know, there will be times I won't do it, but generally speaking, it dictates. Once you find a fire point pressure pain, it dictates metal water. If you find liver 2 pressure pain, for example, it may not dictate metal water because if the person comes from endometriosis, for example, liver 5 is going to probably be more important for me than liver 4 and 8. So it depends on circumstances. Okay, with the other channels, it's a strong pull towards using metal water, but it does not fully dictate. In kidney and pericardium, it's almost 99.5% of the cases, it's a dictation. It's like, you found it, you do it. Other channels, you found it, but you find something else that actually did a better job. Okay, you could get away with it. Okay? But that started from adrenal. Adrenal finding is below kidney 16, 4 o'clock, 8 o'clock. Possibly kidney 2 pressure pain, and SCM is a possibility that dictates, that says it's adrenal. If you have adrenal, we do kidney below the knee plus kidney 27. How do we know which kidney below the knee to use? Originally, we used kidney 6. But for example, if you have kidney 2 pressure pain, we'll use kidney 7 and 10. If you have slow pulse, we would tend to use kidney 7. If you have issues in the throat or jaw, I would tend to use kidney 9. Okay. So there's a whole bunch of options about which kidney point do you choose below the knee.
When you say issues in throat or jaw, do you mean like TMJ?
TMJ would be
sore throat.
sore throat, probably not. Sore throat actually, quite honestly, is kidney 6 often does the job just like the TCM.
So like throat example would be
Uh,
pain.
Yeah, well, thyroid issues, yeah. you know, I mean, thyroid issues may be kidney 7, especially if it's hyperthyroid. You know? So you have to kind of, all I'm saying is you have to test which one does the best job. And some of this you will find as you move your fingers up the channel, you will find bumps along the channel, and sometimes, you know, kidney 7 is a place where there's a bunch of bumps, and there's kidney 9, you know, so you're gonna go, I wonder what's going on here, and then test it against the abdomen and see which one does a better job. So you basically, unless you have kidney 2 pain, you basically, you have 4 o'clock, 8 o'clock, you want to do adrenal, you have no idea what point you're using until you check which one does the best job. Make sense?
Can you show us how you find kidney 9?
Yeah, and I'll get someone on the table in a second and I'll do that. But basically I slide up until I stop at the base of the muscle, and then I look for, you know, something that's going to make sense in the terms that I'm interested in connective tissue. So I'm not going to look for, you know, for just like, whoa, I stopped. I'm going to start by, okay, is there something that's a little bit more nodular there? There's often a nodule around, oh, something that feels a little bumpy, you know, more tense maybe. Yeah.
So if there's nothing, if you find no nodule in the area, do you look for another appointment?
Not necessarily. Okay, this leads to a really interesting question. Do points have to be painful? The answer is no. Often patients will say, especially like if you, oh, that's the right point. The question is, did it release kidney 16? It doesn't matter. Sometimes maybe, there are all sorts of ideologies that we can have or other people have. And one of them is the point should be active. What I'm saying is the point is active if it releases what it needs to release. The fact that I can find in my finger a really either painful point, a nodular point, big edema, you know, all sorts of interesting things in the point, that is a good indication that it's a good point, but that may not be the case. The point is a few millimeters away from it, and it may not feel to my fingers as interesting. You know, the treatment is not about making my fingers interested. The treatment is about making the patient better. So if I find a point that, wow, this is really cool, there's a really cool point here, but it does nothing on the abdomen, versus this point is really boring, but gee, it clears the whole abdomen. You know, so I wouldn't automatically dismiss it because I found nothing in kidney 9. Nothing at the base of a muscle is a finding. It's unusual, right? You know, so how do I interpret it? It all depends, you know, does that make sense? Because that is a place that doesn't make sense to have absolutely no bump, no nothing. It's totally smooth, and you're how old now? You know, like if you're 5 years old, I get it. But if you're even 20, you've been standing on this poor gastrocnemius for 15 years. You've been standing for at least since age 5, right? So you're 20 years old. 15 years of gravity, this muscle has to keep pumping around. It's a bit odd that they have absolutely nothing there. You know, so yeah, maybe they don't, maybe my fingers aren't sensitive, whatever, it's okay, but nothing is still possibly a finding, and the only way to confirm it is by saying, wow, it releases something. If I press on it and nothing happens, then yeah, it really is nothing. Does that make sense? All right. So at least it gives us, you know, these protocols give us a little bit of a common language to be able to start doing things. Is that okay? So actually, I want to go through 5 more minutes. Are you okay to wait? Okay. One more useful protocol is if you find pressure on the SCM. So we call, or I call this style, you know, Kiiko's, one of the first books that Kiiko came out with, it was called Higher Diagnosis Reflection on the C. So sometimes we refer to this abdominal palpation thing, higher diagnosis, you know. But it's, you know, first of all, you know, does the hara include the chest? Does the hara even include anything about the navel? You know, I mean, it's a nice term. You know, it sounds lovely, okay? But it's not really about heart. Yeah, you can call it, oh, there's a metal rod. You just have to pull it, yank it out of there. Yeah, and you can do the other one if you want to. When I say hara, abdominal diagnosis, The throat, actually, the throat and the neck may be a lot more important than the abdomen for many patients. And many patients, you can't find anything in the abdomen. Well, I don't know many, but there's plenty of patients you don't find anything. It's very annoying. But almost everyone, you will find something. Either along the SCM or the scalenes, you will find, or around the cervicals, you will find something. So palpating the SCM is very important because the SCM is hovering over it. It can, if it's tight, it's going to prevent the vagus nerve from firing. The vagus nerve is a parasympathetic nerve, okay, that feeds most of the organs. The other nerve that's similar to that is the phrenic nerve, which comes from out of C3. Okay, the phrenic nerve controls the diaphragm primarily. So the diaphragm has a lot to do with the nervous system. What do you tell people who are like uptight? Breathe. Releasing the diaphragm is going to affect the nervous system. Okay? Releasing the SCM is going to affect the nervous system because it's going to allow parasympathetic feedback to the rest of the abdomen, to all the organs. So people have tight SCMs, it's very important to release it. So SCM I don't poke, up to one knuckle in. I just poke with the flats of my fingers. And it will show if it's there. And we release it. We call triple warm. I call triple warm 8. I think Kiiko Matsumoto calls it triple warm 9. It's basically 1/3 below the elbow. The way I find it is I slide up the triple warmer channel until I stop. Okay? So slide till you stop. Okay? And if that's not the right point, maybe towards the small intestine channel, maybe slightly above, slightly below is okay. To release opposite side of the SCM. This is one of those points that works the opposite side. If the patient has rapid pulse, Sanjov 5 is a better point to release the SCM. The one thing to remember about this is you're releasing basically the nervous system, so that's that's a huge phenomenon that you want to work with. For me, like almost everybody gets either Sanjov 8 or 5. Almost universally. That's one of those. It's one of those things, and it's been a fashion for more than 20 years for me. So it does not seem to be going away. Okay. Somebody asked me about thyroid in women. That there's a strong connection for thyroid in women. There's a very strong connection for men, urogenital issues, men and their autonomic nervous system. Okay. Releasing the neck for, various, urogenital issues, whether it's prostatitis or whether it's erectile dysfunction, or whether, men who had the hernia operations now need to put, for a while they can't urinate, they got a urinary blockage, and they have to put a catheter. It's awful. Okay, so that's all you have to release stomach line area. Okay, you have to release the SCM. And then for men, then I needle stomach line, but first I release it with opposite side Sanjov 8. Okay, so let's take you in. Bring you in. Come on.
It was just water.
Yeah, that was the advantage.
And now we have something for needle.